are many people listening to me in sick beds of suffering who felt that they should have exhausted themselves months or years ago, but they still can go on suffering. Now, why is this? Why do we have a greater capacity for pain than for pleasure? I think because it was intended by God that all pain here should end. That's why we seem to exhaust it. Because there will come another world when tears will be wiped away. And the sorrows of this life are not worthy to be compared with the joys that are to come. But with pleasure and joy, particularity, is not intended to be exhausted here. That comes elsewhere.
Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we learn from Venerable Fulton Sheen, one of the greatest Catholic teachers in modern times. Join me, Amy Thomas, once a week for a short reading out of Bishop Sheen's book, Way to Inner Peace. It is week 16, Catholic pilgrims, and I welcome you back for another enlightening reading from Bishop Sheen. You know, I regret that I missed a milestone for us. We surpassed a quarter of the year with our readings back on week 13. It's now week 16, so we're 3 weeks behind the congratulatory celebration on that. But yeah, you've been with me for a quarter of the year, a little over. So that's really awesome. And I do thank you all for coming and tuning in every week. You know, it means a lot to me to see that people are actually getting something out of Bishop Sheen's reading. So this week, good grief, get your highlighter out and just highlight the whole thing, you know, as we go through it. I literally had to stop myself from underlining everything, and I had to say, Amy, you cannot talk with these people about every sentence in this week's readings. You have to limit yourself just a tad. But in all honesty, just highlight the whole thing and realize that you are reading very, very prophetic words. Bishop Sheen was writing this back in the 50s. And like I've said on other podcasts, I had to remind myself that he wrote this over 60 years ago. And it's not being written today, but it's so pertinent to what is going on in our culture today. So we're going to be talking about mental cases. Now, I know some of you out there who are listening, you may struggle with some kind of mental case, mental disease. I don't know exactly what. Maybe you suffer from depression or severe anxiety or OCD or bipolar disorder. I don't know. I'm not here to say that all mental diseases are, false or that you're faking it or anything like that. And Bishop Sheen is not saying that. I don't want you to read this as though he's saying nobody ever really has a legitimate mental case, out there. But we are seeing a rise in mental cases, and that is concerning. And it's something that we need to look at and start asking questions about, well, why? Why are we seeing this rise? And so if you are someone who does suffer with, some mental anguish of some kind, try to read this through the lens of, somebody who's not trying to condemn those who do seriously struggle. But there is something going on, and it has something to do with what is going on in our culture, and I think that's worth looking at. So 3 points that you will want to key in on are self-will, discipline, and superiority complex. Number 16, mental cases are increasing. Human beings have always taken for granted that there would be in their midst a few unfortunate individuals whose mental outlook would be warped and unpredictable. But what is disturbing today is the number of otherwise normal people who, in popular language, are, quote, cracking up, unquote. Some are young, otherwise happily married. Others are in middle life with apparent security. But regardless of the age group, as a good American psychiatrist wrote, mental cases are the stepchild of modern civilization. leaving to the medical profession those who are suffering from functional and organic disturbances which affect the mind. Our problem is to inquire into the reason for the many marginal or fringe cases of mental instability. Coming quickly to the point, it appears to be this. Our generation has been raised on the idea of, quote, self-expression, unquote, which, being translated negatively, means there should never be any self-restraint. Every desire and impulse which satisfies the ego is considered good. Any form of self-denial or repression of biological urges is considered as harmful to the personality. The ego is flattered and pampered, even to a point where children are raised on the theory that they should never be disciplined, much less punished or reprimanded for their selfishness. When a person builds his philosophy of life on the principle of self-will, he is in for a tremendous shock. It happens that most other people he meets in the world have exactly the same principle. The result is that one individual has his self-will contradicted by another. The ego is negated by another ego. Wishes are not fulfilled, whims are negated, crossed, and rejected by other egos equally bent on self-assertion. This constant battering and challenge from other wills makes the mind confused, fills it with the sense of being persecuted, creates unhappiness, revenge, and spitefulness. Some seek professional advice regarding their confused mental state and are told that they are suffering from an inferiority complex. The truth of the matter is, nobody who is self-willed has an inferiority complex. He has a superiority complex. He is so full of conceit, pride, and aggressive assertiveness that his hurt feelings may, for the moment, appear as inferiority. But he would not feel hurt if he did not have a diabolical pride or superiority which would treat anyone who does not flatter him as Pontius Pilate treated Christ. Pilate washed his hands of Christ and had him executed. The hour has come for educators, sociologists, and citizens to reverse their steps, to see that if the self is to be really happy, it must be disciplined, pruned, denied, and negated by itself. No better law for inner peace has ever been given than that of the divine Savior. If anyone will come after me, let him take up his cross daily and follow me. Luke 9:23. In other words, crosses and contradictions are a part of life. We are to expect them from others simply because they are often as unregenerate as ourselves. Contradictions from others will hurt us less when we have first contradicted ourselves. The hand that is calloused will not pain as much as a soft hand on catching a hard ball. Contradictions can even be assimilated and used for further taming our own errant impulses. But the will that always insists on having its own way begins to hate its own way. Those who live only for self begin to hate self. Self is too narrow, confining, and dark a sanctuary for happy adoration. Crosses are inescapable. Those who start with self-love have already created for themselves the possibility of millions of other crosses from those who live by the same pride. But those who discipline themselves and tame the ego by little acts of self-denial have already prepared themselves to meet crosses from the outside. They have familiarized themselves with them, and the shock is less when they are thrust on their shoulders. There are only two things we can do with crosses: carry them or kick against them. We can merge them in God's plan for life and thus make them serve our inner peace and happiness, or we can stumble over them to the glen of weeping. Selfishness is the cause of much mental sickness. Otherness, sympathy, forgiveness, and self-discipline are the cure. I was listening the other day to a podcast that was doing a very kind of in-depth study of some recent surveys and studies that have come out that have been looking at the mental stability or instability of the younger generations among us. And what they have found is truly, truly tragic. Never before have we seen such young people so miserable, depressed, suicidal. And this is all before COVID. COVID exacerbated a growing problem with our younger people. And millennials and Gen Zers, high numbers of them are reporting this malaise about life. They feel depressed. They're completely unhappy. They see no point. Their suicide rates are skyrocketing, and mental cases among them are going up. And so we really do have to ask ourselves, what in the world is going on? Because I truly believe that here very soon, because of the way our society is trending, I think we're going to see some devastation like we've never known, sadly. But I think Bishop Sheen explains what's going on very well. And so when we look at the beginning of this reading, he's talking about how there have always been those among us that, are mentally disturbed in some way. And like I said before, he's not condemning everybody who has a mental illness. What he's looking at is, why are the cases rising? It used to be kind of not the norm that people would be struggling with certain things, but now we have high reports of depression, high reports of anxiety, unhappiness, all these things, and we have to ask what is going on. And so I think this quote here at the end of the first paragraph is definitely worth looking at. He says, a good American psychiatrist wrote, "Mental cases are the stepchild of modern civilization." Now, as things have gotten easier in the world, we don't have to all grow our own food or make our own clothes or work in really difficult jobs. We don't have to just survive. In fact, you could say that we are thriving. Medical technology is far superior to anything the world has ever seen. We are able to make so much food to the point where we're almost gluttonous about it in certain parts of the world. A lot of us don't have to work, quote unquote, hard, meaning like really tough jobs that require a lot of physical exertion. And so that was what we used to do. And our lives revolved around surviving and working and providing for the family. And the thing is that everybody had a role, and everybody knew that they were involved in the survival of the family or the survival of the community. And everybody knew that they had a purpose and a place, and they were needed, and they needed to kind of, pull their own weight. But we've gotten rid of all of that. And you can see this in the fact that so much of the things that we consume are just wants and services that you don't necessarily need. I mean, we spend billions of dollars on pet accessories. It's absolutely insane. But it is part of the modern world. This is what comes from the modern world. We've advanced ourselves so much, but we have not replaced what we once did with anything productive. In fact, we've just replaced it with entertainment or whatever makes you feel good. And so I think this is a key problem in our society. And so Bishop Sheen says at the bottom of the page, our generation has been raised on the idea of self-expression, which being translated negatively means that there can never be any self-restraint. There was a time when, just the elements, nature, forced self-restraint upon you and self-denial because food could be lacking, or you could just be cold because, you couldn't find fur or skins or things like that. And so you knew what it was like to go without. My grandfather would often talk about how, if he got an orange for Christmas, that was amazing. He came from a family of 10 kids and they lived in western Kansas in a sod house. And I just would listen to that and be like, an orange for Christmas, and you thought that was amazing? But that's how spoiled we are. They went without so often that when they even got, something like an orange, it was an amazing day. And we don't have that going on in our lives anymore. We can go get as many oranges as we want at the grocery store. There's no self-restraint, and nature doesn't really even impose it on us, at least here in, first world countries. And so What has replaced all that hard work and that purposeful labor that we once did is entertainment, like I said. And what comes along with that is just self-expression. Just do whatever you want. I hate the phrase, you do you, just do whatever makes you happy. I see t-shirts like that all the time, and I just get so mad about it because it's such a dumb expression. Because if you take it to the fullness of it, if you take it all the way, you do you. Well, what if I'm a serial killer? Are you going to tell me you do you? Hey, you're a serial killer. You do you. If someone is a pedophile, are we actually going to say to them, hey, you do you, do whatever makes you feel happy? But that's where that motto leads towards. You don't get to say, no, not that. Well, you've just told everybody that they can do what they want to do and whatever makes them happy. Who are you to tell them that there's a line drawn? And so I just really dislike that slogan. I just wish we would get rid of it. But let's move on with Bishop Sheen. He says, when a person builds his philosophy of life on the principle of self-will, he is in for a tremendous shock. Now, this is what we've done with young people. We've told them, oh, do whatever makes you feel happy. You do you. Everything in moderation, including moderation, another slogan that I absolutely cannot stand. So we've told everybody, just follow your own self-will. Who am I to hold you back? Whatever your heart desires, you go for it. Okay, so we've told everybody that, and there's no moral compass. Just do whatever you want. Well, what's going to happen? Well, John over here, he's got his self-will. He's going to meet up with Mark, and Mark has his self-will. And they're not going to align on the things that they want or believe in or anything like that. And they are going to clash because they're both going to try to assert their self-will on the other person. And what happens when you don't get your way? Well, we see it on the grand stage of our society. People scream at each other. They need safe spaces where their feelings aren't hurt. They're offended by everything. There's all these microaggressions. I don't want to listen to what you have to say because it just so offends me. Words are violence, and it's just on and on and on. All these ways we're trying to shut people down because they're not doing what I want. And the person next to me goes, but you're not doing what I want. And so nobody's happy. And Bishop Sheen explains this so amazingly. He says, the result is that one individual has his self-will contradicted by another. The ego is negated by another. Wishes are not fulfilled. Whims are negated, crossed, and rejected by other egos equally bent on self-assertion. And so what happens? They're depressed. They're upset. Nobody is doing what I want. And what do? He tells us they go seek professional advice, and they're told they have an inferiority complex. You're just not speaking up for yourself enough. Nobody's listening to you. And people are thinking, yes, that's right. But what they really have is a superiority complex. He is so full of conceit, pride, and aggressive assertiveness that his hurt feelings may for the moment appear as inferiority, but he would not feel hurt if he did not have a diabolical pride or superiority which would treat anyone who does not flatter him as Pontius Pilate treated Christ. Oh my gosh, that is so true. This is the era that we're living in. We have all of these egos that have nothing in common. They're not bounded in anything foundational. There once was a time when, for the most part, things were bounded and rooted in the foundation of Christian principles. And we were told that, yeah, some things are wrong and there are things that are objectively right. But that's all gone away. And so because it's all gone away and everything is subjective and everybody is fighting to have their ego heard, none of us are happy. None of us are doing well. We're all just miserable because nobody's going along with us, and we stamp our foot, and that's so sad. I was talking to my daughter about this the other day when we were going through her religion studies. I homeschool my kids, and my middle daughter is a junior in high school, and we're talking about, the 10 Commandments and all those types of things. And we're talking about specifically the first commandment, to worship God. And what we see today is a worship of the self, right? That is what we are seeing. And the reason we're seeing this so prevalently is because collectively we have removed God from the outside conversation, right? We have told everybody, take your religion and just keep that as a private thing in your home. Separation of church and state. We don't want to talk about that in public. Everybody will be upset. And so we've removed God from the public sphere for the most part, right? And by removing him, and we don't talk about him anymore, and very few families these days are attending church regularly and really having these deep discussions with their kids about God and their faith and the commandments and all these things. What happens is that young people don't understand and realize that they were willed into existence by a God that loves them deeper than they could possibly imagine, and that they are unique. There will never be another them. There wasn't somebody like them in the past, and there will never be somebody like them in the future. They are uniquely made for a reason. God gave them a purpose, and they are to discover what that purpose is. And that purpose is going to be something outside of themselves, helping people in some capacity. Now, we have a lot of people today who, when you ask them what they want to do when they grow up, they want to do something big. But it's not for the reasons why you think. It's not because they really want to, make people's lives better. It's mostly that they want to be seen. They want to make it into the history book so that their name is not forgotten. Because when you remove God from the picture, all there is this life. And people are scared to death that their names are not going to be known when they turn to dust. I mean, we all kind of fear that in a way, don't we? But it's even more profound these days because people don't have the hope of heaven. And they're just listlessly riding through this life with no purpose or anything. And so we've left this gigantic group of people with no purpose, no grounded foundation in, God's love and understanding that they are a unique individual that was willed into existence. We've removed all of that. And then we've told them, just go for it in your life. Just whatever your will wants, you do that. That's where you're going to find happiness, is what we've told people. And there's no self-restraint. There's no self-denial. There's no discipline. And so people are just becoming slaves to their vices. He even says that. He says, the hour has come for educators, sociologists, and citizens to reverse their steps, to see that if the self is to be really happy, it must be disciplined, pruned, denied, and negated by itself. No better law for inner peace has ever been given than that of the divine Savior. If anyone will come after me, let him take up his cross daily and follow me. And then Bishop Sheen goes into talking about crosses. And the reality is that we are all going to have crosses. No one is going to go through this life and escape having at least one cross in their life. But the problem is when we tell people to just give in to their passions, to just give in to their self-will, that all that matters is their happiness and what they want, they're going to create for themselves, like he says, millions of other crosses. Because now they're going to come into conflict with other people who have been told the same things, and they're all going to have hurt feelings, and they're all going to fight against each other, and they're all going to hate each other because they don't know how to do without, and they don't know how to hear someone tell them, no, you can't do that. And so like a little 2-year-old, they throw temper tantrums and throw fits and want people canceled and want people removed from their sight and never to be seen again. And family members don't talk to family members, and friends leave one another because the clash of the ego. And it's so sad, but really the good news is that it starts in our family. It really does. And so what we have to do is teach our kids. You're going to have crosses in your life. Bad things are going to happen to you. You are going to have people come into your life that are going to trample all over you, be mean to you, try to push you down. So be prepared for that. It doesn't mean you have to be a doormat, but be prepared for that. What you need to do is always try to do the right thing, whether it feels good or not. Because when you choose to do the wrong thing just because it feels good, what comes with that is shame and regret and bitterness. And like Bishop Sheen said, you'll start to hate yourself. And that makes you an unlikable person, and you will just isolate yourself more and more and more. At the very end, he says, there are only two things we can do with crosses: carry them or kick against them. We can merge them in God's plan for life and thus make them serve our inner peace and happiness, or we can stumble over them to the glen of weeping. Selfishness is the cause of much mental sickness. Otherness, sympathy, forgiveness, and self-discipline are the cure. And so, like I said before, we have to start within our own families. We have to teach our kids each year that they get a little bit older how to be a little more disciplined, how to have some self-denial every once in a while. My 7-year-old son, he joined in on Lent this year because he's 7, and that's the age of reason. And he did this little thing called Nerd Lent, where you write out about 10 things. You roll a dice every morning to see what you have to do. Some days it's adding something into your daily routine, and some days it's omitting something. And so some days he would have to go without a treat after dinner, or he wouldn't be able to watch his favorite Star Wars show or something like that. Those are things that teach him to deny himself a little bit. It's okay to teach a 7-year-old that. And instead of indulging all the time, teach him to deny himself. And how much better is it once you've denied yourself when you finally do get it? It's even more of a treat. It's even more special. And then at the same time, there were days when he could roll and he would have to add something in, like read a chapter in the Bible or something like that. And so there's the learning to accept the foundations of our faith, which are found in Scripture, but then also learning to be a little disciplined. And he did a remarkably good job with it. Especially on those days when he had to, deny himself something, being very congratulatory towards him was something that my husband and I really tried to do. And, talking about how you're really being a big boy by doing this, and teaching him that this is something that he can have control over, and that it is hard sometimes, but it all starts in our families, having these conversations, being willing to do it ourselves, to deny ourselves things, sweets, a show, and maybe pray instead. All of these things will bring us more happiness than really anything that we could indulge in. And so we just have to have the fortitude and perseverance to see them through. I think if we start in our families, start with your teenagers, sit down with them and talk with them, or just, if your kids are out of the house, you and your spouse, or if you live alone, just start turning the tide in your own life, and people will see it. They'll see that you're happy, and they'll see that you don't indulge in everything, and that will make a difference. You will shine a light, and they will wonder, and they will ask. I promise you, they will ask. And then you'll get a chance to tell them, all about our faith and what you've been doing and where you find true happiness. And that's how we bring people to Christ, honestly. You can stand on a bullhorn in Las Vegas like they used to do when I lived there, but I'm pretty sure they weren't really catching anybody. Or you can just show it through your life and your actions. and people will take notice eventually. So that is all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. I will see you back here for week 17. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.